Hey, how's it going guys? It's Nathaniel here. And Skyrim is a game of many things that don't always make the most sense. Why is there not a famine considering the low amount of crops compared to people? How have prices remained so consistent across 5 Elder Scrolls games and hundreds of years without inflation? You get the idea. Well, to answer these questions, and usually more serious ones, the community has manufactured hundreds of complex theories that may or may not always make the most sense. Anyway, it's been a while since we've done one of these videos, and even longer since we made one that's worth watching. So what a better time to do it than right now. Anyway, sit back and relax as we take a look at 5 more theories in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Part 3 if I recall correctly. Starting off, Candlehearth Hall is the largest inn and tavern located in Windhelm. Sitting at almost the center of the city, chances are you've seen, and most likely been, in this iconic building dozens of times. However, how does a tavern get such a name? Candlehearth Hall. Well, speak to Candlehearth's owner, a Nord named Elda Earlydawn, and she'll tell you the building was originally the home of a great warrior long ago. When that warrior passed away, around 200 years ago, his son, a Nord named Diracht, lit a small candle above his hearth, and that candle's flame simply never went out. Eventually, when the place became an inn, they decided to name it in honor of that phenomenon. Even to this day, the candle is still burning. You can see it located directly above the inn's fireplace on the 2nd floor. Well, some players suspect that there's a little more to this candle than just a lucky memorial, and that it in fact holds some Daedric origin. You see, in The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, which takes place around 400 years prior to the events of Skyrim, towards the end of Azura, the Daedric Queen of Night's quest, she'll light 5 candles nearby her shrine in memory of her followers that will never go out. The candles simply don't expire. Some have connected the metaphorical dots, and believe that the candle we see still burning in Candlehearth Hall may in fact be one of Azura's, or at very least related to the Daedric Prince in some capacity. If this was one of Azura's original 5, which never stopped burning, then the story behind Candlehearth's origins would have to be somewhat inaccurate, considering Diracht lit the candle himself. So maybe his father, or he himself, was a follower of Azura's. Whatever the case, if there's no relation, it's certainly a strange coincidence nonetheless. Next on our list, we all know the tale regarding the origins of the Falmer. Originally snow elves thousands of years ago, fearing complete extinction at the hands of newly arrived Nords, they made a pact with the Dwemer to save their species. The dwarves agreed to let the elves take refuge in their massive underground fortresses, cities, and settlements, but in exchange, the new refugees would have to consume a fungus that would ultimately render them blind shortly after being eaten. The snow elves were reluctant, but out of options, so they agreed. Sometime afterward, the newly blinded elves would be fully enslaved by the Dwemer and made into servants. Of course, after generations of living underground and eating that fungus, the once majestic snow elves devolved into the twisted race we all now know today. It's also not made entirely clear whether or not the Falmer also agreed to be enslaved and made into servants, though obviously they weren't in much of a position to say no anyway. However, most assume that the Falmer were blinded so that they would eventually make less rebellious slaves. It's not so easy to fight if you literally can't see. Though after a few hundred years, the Falmer revolted anyway, but that's beside the point. Some suspect, however, that the Falmer weren't blinded to make them less likely to revolt, but instead so they couldn't see something that the Dwemer were hiding. Or maybe it was a little bit of both. This suggestion definitely weighs heavy on me, because it seems so obvious, and it makes a bit of sense, yet is also rather disturbing. I mean, revolts aside, if I were to enslave an entire species of elf, I would probably want them to be able to see so they could work harder. Either the dwarves were just so petrified of an elf uprising that they decided to compromise their ability to work to make them worse fighters, or there was something they really didn't want them looking at. Coming in at number 3, I'm willing to bet every one of you watching this video is very familiar with Lydia. She's given to the player as a housecarl by Jarl Bolgruf after completing the early main quest, Dragon Rising, as a bit of a thank you for helping Whiterun slay that dragon that was attacking their tower. But interestingly, unlike most followers, Lydia has literally no backstory at all. We know absolutely nothing about her past. Period. At all. Additionally, like most companions, she's not always the sharpest tool in the shed. constantly blocking doorways and messing up your efforts to sneak past enemies. Will this combination of not-so-fantastic AI and lack of any real backstory have led some to speculate that perhaps Lydia was brainwashed? Now, look, I never said you had to believe all of these theories or they had to make the most sense, but hear me out. Lydia likely held some position in Whiterun's court before becoming your housecarl, considering she's given to you by Bolgraf. But we don't know what her position was. The most commonly floated idea is that perhaps Farengar Secretfire, Whiterun's court mage, had something to do with this brainwashing mind wipe operation on Lydia. Now, we don't know why she would need such an operation, or what her position was in life beforehand, or even how such an operation would be performed, but that's why this is called a theory. It would explain Lydia's lack of a past and her poor decisions in battle, though, again, the last one could probably be chalked up to Bethesda's poor AI. Whatever the case, I know nothing about Lydia's backstory, so I'm considering this headcanon until Bethesda says something. For 4th spot, Lurkers are horrifying, gigantic creatures that were introduced with the Dragonborn DLC. They mostly serve Hermias Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge. However, many are instead loyal to Murak. They can be found in Apocrypha, though some can also be randomly encountered on the island of Solstheim for some reason. At first, it's easy to assume Lurkers are just another Daedra, a creature created entirely by a Daedric god, in this case Hermias Mora, in order to serve them. However, it's believed by some players that Lurkers may not be Daedra at all, but instead a mutated form of a creature native to Tamriel itself, perhaps mutated or corrupted by Hermias Mora, but not entirely created by him like most other Daedra. You'll recall a similar theory being floated regarding Seekers in a previous video. The reason why so many people are unsure if Lurkers are actual Daedra is that should the player attack a Lurker with either a Banish or Expel Daedra spell, which either completely destroys, or at least damages Daedra it's used against, the Lurker will completely resist. Completely resisting these spells is something only non-Daedra can do. The Lurker's appearance is quite a hard one to justify, however. It's speculated that Lurkers could in fact be mutated fish or ocean creatures. Although, I'm not quite sure how these ocean creatures would get 9 feet tall and develop limbs, but never underestimated Daedra, I guess. Additionally, you'll notice that many Lurkers also possess slaughterfish scales in their inventory when murdered to death. It's one of the few items they have. Though this may just be because they eat the fish sometimes. Whatever the case, Lurkers are terrifying. And finally, last on our list, the identity of the Night Mother is one of the biggest mysteries in all of the Elder Scrolls. Officially, according to the Dark Brotherhood, she was once the mortal bride of Sithis, who ascended into semi-godhood after passing away. Some authors allege that she was instead a member of the Thieves Guild, who split off and created her own organization, and then promptly ascended into godhood. Heck, in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, there's a quest offered by the Morag Tong to assassinate a woman calling herself the Night Mother. Maybe she's the true individual in question. Regardless, many an Elder Scrolls fan have spent countless sleepless nights trying to unravel this whole mystery. Well, one of the most prominent theories that I personally think holds the most weight and is the most fascinating that I'm going to share with you is that the Night Mother isn't a real being or entity at all. That she is instead the Daedric Prince of Murders, Conspiracy, and Deceit, Mephala, impersonating something. You see, Mephala is the chief deity worshipped by the Morag Tong, the Dark Brotherhood's arch-rivals, a similar assassin's cult operating out of Morrowind. According to some legends, the Dark Brotherhood actually emerged as a splinter organization to the Morag Tong thousands of years ago, though even that is still somewhat unconfirmed. But we do know with a pretty high degree of certainty that Morag Tong and Dark Brotherhood agents have been killing each other for many years since, regardless of whether or not the origin story holds any weight. Some speculate that Mephala, again the Daedric Prince of Murder, Secrets, Plots, and Conspiracies, took up the persona of the Night Mother in order to encourage some chaos within the Morag Tong and cause the Dark Brotherhood to split away. And Mephala has simply been misleading the Brotherhood ever since. Now, there's a couple of holes in this theory, so to speak, that I'm going to try my best to address. The first is, where is Sithis during all of this? Surely a being as powerful as he wouldn't really appreciate someone pretending to be his wife. Well, many don't really think Sithis works that way. According to the book, Sithis is described as being not a deity of any kind, but is instead a static force without a consciousness, personality, intent, or will of its own. Sithis, simply put, wouldn't care, or more specifically, couldn't care. If this truly is an accurate portrayal of what Sithis is, then it does really undermine the Dark Brotherhood's own origin story that they claim to believe. Because if Sithis lacks any intent, will, or personality, then it doesn't really explain why he would have chosen to have a wife. Again, the Brotherhood believes the Night Mother was originally a mortal person who Sithis chose to have 5 children with. But if he can't really make choices, then that doesn't hold any sway. So the next question is, why would Mephala do this? Why would she seek to pretty much go against an organization of her worshippers? And the solution is pretty simple. It's for her own amusement. In the anonymously written book, Book of the Daedra, which describes each and every one of the Daedric gods in depth, Mephala is described as a web spinner, whose, quote, only consistent theme seems to be the interference in the affairs of mortals for her own amusement. It's argued that this huge web of theories and possible explanations for the Night Mother that no one can really explain for sure, all allude to what Mephala is the Daedric god of. Plots, conspiracies, and of course, murder, considering it's the Dark Brotherhood. Mephala may have assumed the persona of the Night Mother in order to create the Dark Brotherhood and have them and the Morag Tong pitted against each other, murdering each other's members simply so Mephala could watch and chuckle to herself. At least, that's one theory. What do you think? But with that, we are going to wrap up. 5 more theories in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Which on this list did you find to be the most likely to be true? Which one was your favorite, and what wacky theories of your own do you know of that I've yet to cover? Leave a comment down below. Speaking of comments, if you think you can dispute any of these theories with your own ideas and explanations, I definitely encourage you to do so. Personally, I must have spent literal hours trying to study Mephala and her relationship with the Night Mother for the last theory presented on this list. And even then, I didn't feel entirely confident with what I was talking about. So maybe one of y'all can enlighten me. Anyway, as always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for stopping by everyone, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everybody.